Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. It's my weekly platform to rant and rave and turn your ear on what's got me worked up day by day. Plus, of course, I don't want to expose you to just a 45-minute run of me going on. I have interesting guests and others to pitch in, along with news updates and other such goodies. This is a live show for a lot of you anyways. If you're watching live, hey, use that comment scroll. I see Mr. Stanley and Paradoxy already in there. Send questions my way, the guests' way. Chat with each other. I appreciate it. I like seeing that moving in there. I won't necessarily read them all out, but I do see them all, and it helps keep the discussion along. Just stay somewhat civil, guys. You don't have to go too far off the handle. We've got X for that. So today I'm going to have Councillor from Calgary, McLean, on. We got some big things to talk about. I mean, I understand there's a lot of listeners and viewers outside of Alberta, but municipal issues are big across the country. We're all paying big prices for them. I see one of the blunt comments, and I'll address it, and it's a good one. I was talking about that before the show from Mr. Stanley, saying, what the hell did you do to your hair, Cory? And you're right. I kept putting off getting it cut. I tried gel on it today, and it didn't work out with the crap. So yes, I'll get the bloody haircut next week. I hate getting my haircut. It's a pain in the butt. Either way, yeah, deal with it. So what's coming out of my mouth rather than what's coming out of my head that's important today. So let's get on with what's got me worked up. And as you saw in the title, we're talking about monkeypox. Yeah, or mpox, as they like to say. Authoritarians, they're eager to return to the heady days of national emergencies with some sort of infectious disease to keep everybody afraid. They've been desperately seeking a new pandemic for a couple of years, and so far they've been out of luck. I mean, the bird flu failed to captivate the developed world despite the best efforts of legacy media, and now the establishment's trying again, and this is the second round of it, to convince the world that monkeypox is indeed going to surge and threaten us all. You can't go a day without seeing a news item on monkeypox and the threat that it allegedly presents. But the statistics just don't justify the attention it's garnering. I mean, monkeypox came and went a couple of years ago, but it had very little impact. There's now apparently a new strain we must watch for. Yes, of course. Doesn't it sound familiar? The new strain. Currently, the number of people diagnosed in Canada with this new strain is 0. Whether you're looking at the old strain or the new strain, the death count in Canada for both strains remains consistent at 0. You have as much chance of dying of monkeypox in Canada as you do of leprosy, but you wouldn't know it from watching the news. Like I said, we're supposed to call it mpox since monkeypox is apparently insensitive to monkeys or something. I'm going to keep simple and keep to the term monkeypox. I don't think too many monkeys read my columns anyways. All that said, monkeypox does exist. It does sound like a nasty disease to catch. Even if it isn't fatal, it's going to make you pretty sick, and your body could be covered with oozing lesions that might scar, kind of like chickenpox. The news is also warning us that monkeypox could come without symptoms. So how they know that remains a mystery because people without symptoms don't get tested for monkeypox. But I guess that's so somehow the experts know. Sounds familiar again, doesn't it, though? Asymptomatic COVID, I mean, that swept the world as well. Diseases have become so sneaky we can't even tell that we have them anymore. Now, part of the issue with monkeypox is that it's being predominantly spread among the gay male community. That adds a political sensitivity element to the whole issue, which tempts folks to try and claim this disease threatens everybody because we don't want to offend anybody. But that's a dangerous and stupid approach to take with an infectious disease. That approach to a novel disease was done before, and it came at a cost of untold lives. You got to remember, for those of us old enough, when AIDS first came upon the scene in the early 80s, the first reports were blunt. It was pretty frightening. A new disease was sweeping the gay male community, predominantly in California, and it was fatal. It was called gay acquired immune deficiency initially. Yeah, GAIDS. And it was also referred to as the gay cancer. I'm pretty insensitive, but it really got to the point, didn't it? Now, the word was gay was dropped, and the term AIDS came from there on in. But as it became evident how horrible and dangerous this disease was, the strategy became one of trying to tell everybody that they were at risk for it. When I was in high school in the 80s, we were told that it would sweep the heterosexual community. Within years, we'd all know somebody with AIDS. It was a frightening scenario for those of us entering our 20s when we were approaching our peak promiscuity. And thankfully, the warnings of the transmissibility of the HIV virus were greatly exaggerated. The disease wasn't that easy to transmit through conventional sex. And while the spread was devastating to those impacted, it certainly was. You can't understate that. It remained predominantly within the gay, male, and IV drug-using communities. That said, again, we can't understate it. It killed millions of people and is still killing people today. But what if instead of pretending the disease was hitting everybody equally, we'd set aside political correctness and targeted prevention and treatment toward the communities that were hit worst? Good lives have been saved if more outreach was directed to the gay, male, and IV drug-using communities rather than pretending it was a risk for everybody. Resources for diagnosis, prevention, and treatment surely could have been better utilized and more effective if they'd been directed to the areas where they were needed most. Instead, our medical experts and social services were running around trying to tell heterosexual high school kids that they were at high risk when they weren't. The disease never spread as they said it would, but the fear sure did. Now, monkeypox isn't the threat that the panic porn pushers are trying to make it into, but it still can be terrible for those affected. But let's not repeat the errors of the 80s and succumb to political correctness rather than being guided by medical reality. Again, this is being predominantly spread in the gay male community. If we want to prevent it from spreading and harming people, let's target prevention, diagnosis, and treatment to the communities most likely to be hit. It's not a slight against the LGBTQ community to do this. If you really wanted to harm the community, I can't think of a better way than to pretend this was a widespread problem outside of the community and spread the resources too thin all over again. The left loves to how we'll follow the science when talking about policy issues. Well, it's time we set political correctness aside and follow the science when it comes to dealing with infectious diseases. Okay, that's what's got me going. Monkeypox kickoff for today. Let's see what else is happening in the news outside of infectious diseases. We got our news editor, Dave Naylor, in studio. How's it going, Dave?
It's going well, Cory. Yeah, I was watching TV last night, and the commercial came on for the world's most interesting guy. You know what I'm talking about?
That old series, yeah, it was for a beer or something.
Series, yeah. And I'm thinking, no, Cory Morgan is the world's most interesting guy. A lot of people don't know, before you became a world-famous media superstar, you had a series of other interesting careers, including that as a gold prospector. And I understand you went back to your roots a few weeks ago.
I did. We went out. We hit the, there's the pictures. We went out by Kamloops there and dug some gravel and moved some and we found a few tiny flakes of gold. With a few hours work, I got almost like $20 worth of gold out of there. I used to have claims. It was quite fun. It never made much money out of it.
I was going to say, what's the biggest nugget you ever found?
Oh, I don't know. It was barely measurable. We're talking a tenth of a gram sort of thing going on. But it was enough to make me excited to see that literal flash in a pan anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And then your beekeeping is producing award-winning results already.
It is now officially award-winning. Yes, it was on a whim. It was Jane said, we should, because they produced so much honey this year, so you should put some of that into the county fair. I mean, the Millerville Prentice Fair is actually a very big one, and we entered it. So what the hell? I could give them a jar. And we came in third out of it turns out it was like 9 entries. So yes, now it's award-winning honey. So we're going to, of course, have to triple the price from here.
Does it have an official name?
No, just honey from the Morgan house right now. That's why the marketing is more Jane's department than
okay. Well, yeah, you kindly gave me some. I've got on my desk. So I'm looking forward to that. And not only that, Cory, but you're even leading off the website at the moment. With your column on sort of a warning for BC Conservatives not to make the same mistake that we did in Alberta, which led to the election of the NDP government. And they need to get together and not split the vote, I assume, is the point of your column. I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Or even along the lines of, I know they're not going to merge at this point, but the supporters have just got to understand there's only one that's got a realistic chance of winning this. Move on to the other guys, because otherwise you're just getting 4 more years of NDP. We figured it out the hard way. Hopefully BC does.
And we actually had a poll yesterday showing Rustad's 3 points up now.
Yeah.
It's utterly amazing to me. Also is a story on roadkill, Cory. Yes. Roadkill, provincial roadkill. And the stat that stood out to Sean Polzer was snakes. I hate snakes. And a good snake is a dead snake. So a couple years ago, there were only 2 reported roadkill snake deaths. Last year, there was 8. This year, we've got 400 already. So who can explain that? We've got a story on Crazy Fred Hahn. He's the national CUPE leader and rabid anti-Israelite. He had a run-in with Ontario Labour Minister yesterday, and the Labour Minister put him straight, and they got into a finger-pointing argument, and you can see that excitement on the website now. Speaking of John Rustad, he's got a response to the opposition parties putting out a tweet attacking some of the statements that his candidates have made. And John Rustad points out it's free speech. You're still allowed that in this country. Ford has become the latest automaker to hit the wall, I guess, with EV manufacturing. They've taken a $2 billion hit on it, and they're scaling back a whole bunch of production. We've got Premier Smith firing back at that University of Alberta professor who mocked her for touring, quote, white-only Alberta. And your columnist colleague, Linda Slobodian, has got a good piece on Nenshi and his, what he called a gut punch reaction to reading about Danielle Smith's looming imposition of pronoun policy in the province. So
Linda's stuff's always great.
Linda's stuff is always good. I think she's one of the best in the country, and we're very lucky to have her. And yeah, so that's what's going on now.
Great, a diverse mix of stories going on out there.
Yeah, from roadkill to politics. I mean, we get everything, Cory.
Well, I'll let you back into digging into it. I hope you don't run into any of those snakes between here and your desk. And,
well, you'll hear the sharp scream and then the thud of my body hitting the ground. Dead from a heart attack.
Well, we haven't seen any in the office yet, so.
No, thank goodness.
All right, well, thanks, Dave. I'll see you after the show.
Thanks, Cory.
All right. And as you see, yes, lots going on, lots breaking. And I mean, this stuff's coming out. We are a news organization. Those stories are being posted as fast as they are breaking. We've got a great crew in there in the newsroom and across the country. The reason we can do that, guys, though, is because you've subscribed. And this is where I got to nag you and remind you, though. The things that pay to keep Dave going on these things, making sure those snakes are kept up to date, is the folks paying $9.99 a month, $100 for a year. Get past that paywall, keeps us going, keeps us independent, so we aren't reliant on the government, and we can report on what's important or even what's whimsical, whether the snakes are important or not. There's a lot of other important things. I mean, where else are you going to find an organization with the knackers to call out the idiocy with the monkeypox news lately? Mpox, whatever you call it. So, hey, check it out, westernstandard.news/subscription. Take one out. It helps support us. We appreciate it. And if you already have, thank you very much. Spread the word. Get other people on board. Something else I want to talk about, and this is getting into the history of our publication. If the name Ted Byfield brings back fond memories, well, we got a party coming up for you guys. On September 25th, Toasting Ted is what it's called. It's going to honor a great conservative who published Alberta Report news magazine. It's going to be bagpipes, singing, live auction stakes, speeches by Premier Smith, Preston Manning, Stephen Harper, quite a lineup. And, again, the Western Standard is the final incarnation or the latest incarnation of Alberta Report that Ted Byfield founded. And I mean, he was a great Albertan. He really made his mark on this province, and this evening of celebration for him is really going to be outstanding. It's an opportunity. Get there, toastingted.ca. That's the website. You can get your tickets. This one's going to sell out. I mean, again, if you want to see Smith, Manning, Harper, all in one spot, one night, be sure to get there. Toastingted.ca, guys. And celebrate the life of Ted Byfield and his whole family, Link and Vince. I mean, they contributed for years in Alberta. So, yeah, all sorts of stuff going on out there. What are we looking at here? Speaking of the constant fear porn, of the constant things making us afraid, here's a beauty out of CTV I read today. It says, regularly eating red meats in particular is associated with a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. Yes, they're going after your meat consumption. Again, this isn't new either. That legacy media, and they got to keep you afraid, and they've got to keep you just against everything you might possibly take pleasure in life. Red meat, they're saying, could be associated. Could be. See, you got to watch these stories when they say could be. But that doesn't seem to matter. The headline's what matters. You read into the story, you get farther. Here's a sentence from that story. The study was observational, so the researchers couldn't conclude that the consumption of meat was the direct cause of the diabetes. So in other words, they're guessing. We kind of sort of might think that red meat is leading to more type 2 diabetes. I mean, the reality is, I think with a lot of health issues, I'm not a doctor, I'm going to limit the amount of health advice I give. God knows I'm not going to give hairstyling advice. It's being within reason, keeping your consumption within reason. And if you have too much of anything, it's not good for you. If you eat too much red meat or pretty much too much of anything, you eat too many donuts, you have too much salt, you have too much liquor, it's going to harm you. It's going to make you sick. It's going to make you unhealthy. But it doesn't mean that any of those particular substances in and of themselves were terribly bad for you. You just have to take them in moderation. But that's no fun. Dining in moderation, that headline doesn't get you anything going on, does it? We got to scare people. No, red meat, guys. It's going to put you into the grave. It's going to give you type 2 diabetes. We think. Maybe. Possibly. And that's what they found headline worthy there. Let's see what else we got there. A rail strike coming up. That's a beauty on it. Sean Polzer is going to come in a little while. I suspect he'll have a little bit to say about that. And that's something we've got to be concerned about. Not that you might be that worried about rail lines in general, but it moves a lot of goods and people don't realize it. The unions know what they're doing. It's just like teachers love to go on strike either right at the end of the school year when the kids are all going to suffer because they won't be able to write their final exams, or they go on strike right at the end of summer when parents are trying to figure out what to do and getting their kids back into school, and they hold the kids hostage, and then they get very well compensated for it. So the rail lines are doing this in harvest season. They know exactly what they're doing, and the unions are, I should say. And this will be settled fairly fast. It's going to cost us a lot, but we just can't afford to have that down for much longer. All right, well, we got our guest in the lobby, and I've been looking forward to talking to him. I haven't had him on in a while. It's Calgary City Councillor Dan McLean, and we're going to talk about big infrastructure projects. Sounds dull, but, when you see your tax bill, these are pretty important things to talk about and cover, and Councillor McLean's been very outspoken. So thank you very much for joining us today, Dan.
Well, thanks for having me again, Cory. I was waiting just sit by the phone. When's he going to call me again?
Oh, yeah, I'm certain that was the case. Most people have my number on block, actually, but I appreciate you're still being willing to indulge here. And boy, you certainly, often, summertime is kind of a dull time for municipal politics. A lot of you guys, you're busy, you're hitting the communities, you're hitting barbecues, you're talking to people, you're doing town hall meetings, but, the news isn't that big. But this year's been different. I want to start with, I guess, the Green Line. That came out, a report. We were kind of waiting a long time. It was kind of as people expected. And for people not familiar with it who are watching from outside of Calgary, this is an extension of the light rail transit system, the train system that just keeps getting more expensive and never seems to be getting built. Can you kind of let us know what the status is going on with that, Dan?
So it came to council and we voted on it. And I think the vote was 9-6 to continue with the project. But it's something I've been listening and been interested in since I got elected 3 years ago. You talk to some of the city builders and the smart people in town, like Steve Allen and Jim Gray, who have been. You'll see different articles and op-eds how they talk about how terrible this is, how this could bankrupt the city, going underground. We always have problems. We could have flooding issues. So I was well aware that we had there was some issues for the scope of the project. Can we do it with the $5.5 billion that we've got from 3 levels of government? And then over the last 3 years, we would get updates from the Green Line board, and they never wanted to make anything public. And they kept a lot of this stuff, even from council, saying, yeah, we're on track, we're on budget, there's been no accidents, until as their deadline came close just a few months ago, then boom, we had to make a decision right now that we're $1.5 billion short. And it's going to be a fraction of the size that we originally wanted it to be. And then we had to go hustle up and see if we go find money from other levels of government, which I have a lot of friends in the provincial government. But as you know, the UCP wasn't willing to throw any more money at what they call the Nenshi nightmare. And the feds didn't either. So what the city now has to do is we've drained our piggy banks from all sorts of different reserves. We're going to increase our borrowing. And again, we're not going to get hardly near the line that we want. So I'm really frustrated and disappointed. I would hope to get a little bit more of a rethink on this and maybe a little bit of an audit on what more could go over budget, because this is serious implications for what we can provide for services for the city if we spend all of our money on this.
Well, yeah, and I guess just to play a bit of devil's advocate, there's some people just saying, pull the pin on this. There's no sense throwing good money after bad. But then there's the people who point out the sunk cost case. There's already been, I believe, $1.5 billion spent on this. The city's downtown's been ripped up for years as I guess they're rearranging underground utilities on it. If they pull the pin on this thing, that would be all for nothing. But at the same time, at the rate we're going, I don't know if there's ever going to be anything. What sort of compromise might be found, though?
Well, there's the old saying my dad told me, don't throw good money after bad. So, yes, we put a lot of money. A lot of that money is put into land acquisition, which, again, we can sell or maintain. That's an asset that isn't just thrown out the window. Moving utility lines, that's an upgraded infrastructure, which, as we've seen with the water pipe, we're probably going to talk about later. Maybe this needed to be done anyways. You mentioned the downtown, and that's the biggest problem I had with it, and many others do as well, is why we focus so much on starting downtown, because that's where all the money goes. That's to the tunneling and the cost overruns could happen. My suggestion was always to go with a BRT, a bus rapid transit. The whole idea for this green line is just to move people around, or mass transit. And where are the people? Down in the deep southeast by the hospital and all the growth with the residents and commercial. So, and we're not even coming close to that right now. We're starting at going from downtown to Ogden, Milliken. It's just a stub of a line. So my compromise would be, Cory, to stop right now. Let's do BRT from Seaton all the way down to, say, City Hall, or at least to the Stampede grounds. Then you can hop on other trains, the red line or the blue line, or different BRTs that go up Center Street. And we can accomplish probably all of this within budget. And that's usually the way we do things, is you start off with a bus, and then you increase ridership, then you go to a bus rapid transit, and then you go to light rail. So I think we're skipping a step here. And again, it's going to cost a lot of taxpayers' dollars.
Yeah, so for big infrastructure, long-term planning too, cities have changed. Like, they've changed dramatically this last decade. COVID sort of taught us that. A lot of people have learned they can work from home, and they've stayed working home. Like, downtowns aren't what they used to be. Downtown Calgary isn't. No downtown is. We don't necessarily really have that need to pile such a large population into a populated center as we used to, and getting to the outlying areas. Like, maybe we might want to start looking at designing cities to accommodate more complete communities in the suburbs rather than focusing all the time on downtown.
I completely agree. There's a ideology that's present around this city council, the majority who are all against suburbs and growth, out in our growing areas where people want to live, where we have new communities, we build it with density and amenities and everything you need there, right there. And they've just really focused on this mass transit. It's got to go transit. If we're going to increase the residences downtown, which we are doing with office conversions, well, they're already living down here. And not only are more people staying at home, in 10 years, by the time this thing is built, technologies are going to change where maybe this is outdated. We have self-driving cars on the market already. A robot van's going to come by and pick you up and run you across the whole city. Who knows? Maybe we'll have flying cars by then. That's what I've always been waiting for.
Well, and a BRT, you see, a kind of a rapid bus route sort of thing can move people fast. It can be set up without nearly as much infrastructure investment, and you can flex that later on if demand or need changed. One of the commenters, paradoxically, did say, is the ridership high enough to support a BRT going into from South Calgary into downtown?
Well, I believe so. The numbers they've given us so far, just for the Ogden Milliken to downtown Eau Claire, which again would require going underground, was 33,000 riders per day. But to achieve that, you'd have to send buses from all over where the people are to that point. So it's kind of a redundancy. The Deep South, I think, this is what we have to look at, our return on our investment, or to justify spending this much money, we have to have the ridership up. So you start with the BRT. We own the land. It's just going to be they're successfully done down 14th Street, down on 17th Ave, going out to Chestermere, up Center Street. They're very successful, and that does the job and much less expensive. So that would be my preference, is if we could somehow pause this and do that instead.
Okay, so let's pivot, as you kind of mentioned before, into the other big issue of this year. And it's a big infrastructure project, though. And I think they're kind of tied together because they cost a heck of a lot of money. It's very essential. And that's the waterline catastrophe in Calgary this year, with the failing of that main line out in Bowness. People had to have rationed water supplies for months. It looks like they're going to endure a bit more as more upgrades go. Just aside from this line in itself, it's obvious, I mean, things wear out. They need to be replaced. They need to be upgraded. But where's the money going to come from? I mean, that it's going to be a huge cost. And I guess that's where we talk about prioritizing. Are you going to invest in a green line, or maybe fix some water lines?
Yeah, priorities. Maybe they should have thought of this years ago. We probably knew this was coming. We're waiting on a report. I want an in-depth report and an audit on that as well, to see, when did we know this line was going to fail? Do we have any warning signs? Who knew, or what could have been done to prevent this? Because I just feel terrible I have so many people in my ward and across the city that, not only their own yards their lawns are dying, or their plants can't be watered, but think of the businesses, the garden centers and the landscapers. I was on the phone this morning with the sod father, sod guy, he's one of the little guys, there's big ones, but they're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars after they already got shut down by COVID. Now they were doing this to them. So the city is not providing that one basic essential service. We should be focusing on those things, on your police and your fire and your essential services. This is what we should be doing in some of these big vanity projects sometimes. So yes, we should be, we know it's coming. And I don't want to raise taxes enough. We just have to find the money from probably efficiencies or maybe reducing the bureaucracy of the city administration would be awesome. But this is definitely a problem, and we have to get on top of this before it gets worse.
Yeah, so getting into savings, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. I saw a posting of yours on X, I believe, just today, talking about reducing bureaucracy. Are you speaking then to a degree of potentially reducing the amount of people working for the city? I mean, there's most definitely probably some demand for it, but that's a pretty touchy area for politicians to get into when you worry about organized labor.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what, Cory? Yes, I did that this morning. I've been saying this since day one. City Hall is just in all levels of government, but I've seen City Hall just increase its size. Each department, the planning department, the parks department, you name it. We hired over 1,000 people last year alone. And if you multiply, they're getting paid more than you or me are getting paid. A lot of these guys. So you're talking hundreds of millions, or 100, 150, $200 million. That pays for a lot of infrastructure. And when it does, I would like to get inside that as well with an audit and see, do we need to add 50 people? There used to be 10 people running this department. Do we need managers upon managers upon managers? This is what we seem to happen. You talk to the people on the street. You talk about the unions that our police and our fire and the guys in the ditches and delivering, the city services. Yes, those are essential. Those people are doing their job. It's all they have 10 managers above them. That's the problem. And I guarantee you, we can find all sorts of fat to cut.
Yeah, so bloated bureaucracies, I mean, they are an issue at every level of government or even businesses if they get too big. Once in a while, they kind of got to get in there and root out the pipes a bit to get efficient again. So, there's going to be, I guess, if any time a city hall is receptive, it's in an election year. And we're kind of approaching one. That's always the one year when Calgary won't raise property taxes. They always defer it the 1 year before election, and then usually there's a nice big hike the year after. But, it's an interesting council. I mean, you can only speak for where you are with Ward 13, but still the feel of it. What do you think in this coming year we can look forward to out of Calgary City Hall?
Well, already, mainly because of this water pipe and because of the green line is the biggest ticket item. Like I said, we're talking $1.5 billion coming out of our reserves or future spending that could put other capital projects on hold, whether it's a fire department station or police services, or even field houses, all sorts of things that we can do that people need. And you can't even do that with our existing budget. The only way to do that is by raising taxes. So you're correct. Most people, the will is now all of a sudden the first 3 years when I've been saying this is, we have 3 successive tax increases in a row, large ones, and they're compounded. So now they're talking about, dumping some projects that are on the books, almost every project on the book, and trying to keep taxes low, which I hope people see through that and just watch how people vote. Who voted for these tax increases? Who voted for all these different subsidies to so many different committees? We have committees and subcommittees and all these different civic partners. They're pretty free spending, and that's just got to stop, not just in election years, but every year. Yeah,
well, I'm certainly hoping that some of that attitude gets out to among your colleagues and we can work towards some changes. Because, I mean, the tax increases, just the cost of living is pressuring everybody terribly these days. It's just been something else. I'll throw one last one at you. I didn't warn you on, but still, the arena. I mean, that's a big one. It's controversial. It's kind of the gears are turning on it. That's fine. The only question I have is, do we have controls to make sure that doesn't blow the budget or ways to watch as it develops? Because it's going to be a big project and taking a while. Yeah,
there's 2 ways of looking at that. And I kind of toss out the people saying we're just giving money to billionaires and millionaire hockey players. In this case, I don't believe that. As far as cost overruns, no, I'm pretty sure. I've been through this whole process, was on the committee. I'm pretty confident that we're going to stay within budget. The province chipped in $350 million for infrastructure around, which we got to, which lowers our costs around, say, $800 million. And then CSEC is paying a lease payment of $17 million, the Flames ownership, per year, plus 40 million up front. And that covers most of that bill as a tenant. There's going to be other revenues as well. And then there's a tax lift. There'll be a lot of property development and new entertainment district and a lot of different buildings that go in, and they call it a community revitalization levy. So they pay a levy on the growth there, which will go into that. And just the fact that if we don't have a hockey team in a major city, I mean, I'm not going to have to drive to Edmonton to watch the Oilers all the time. You can't watch the Flames or track good concerts or Disney on Ice. We've got 4 other sports teams that are playing out of there as well. So it had to be done. Was it the best deal? Hell no. The first deal was a lot better for the city, but the mayor and council blew that one all to hell. So we had to start over again. And I think, Flames ownership got a much better deal this time because they had our backs against the wall. So I'm not happy the way it went down, but I am happy that we're going to have a new facility, and I will be keeping an eye out on the cost overruns.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate you keeping an eye on things and coming on to talk to us today, Dan. I'll let you get back to that tail end of August. I know you've got a heck of a year to look forward to. Before I let you go, I guess, where could people, reach you or see what's going on out there?
You just go to my webpage, Dan McLean, on the Calgary webpage, and then you dial in, to Dan McLean. You'll see I'm the only councillor that publishes my voting record on my city page. I think everybody should do that. We do have an election coming up, like you said, and there will be a whole different aspect with political parties. We'll see how that unfolds. But I just really encourage everybody to look into the research and what your councillor and local area councillor stands for, what their platform is, and make sure that they hold them accountable so we get a little bit more fiscal responsibility and some more common sense down here at City Hall.
Oh, I do appreciate that. Yeah, and putting in those voting records has always been a great thing. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope we can talk again soon because, as I said, I think it's going to be a pretty busy year in your spectrum of politics, and we appreciate your voice on it.
I appreciate your work you do as well, Cory.
Great. Thanks, Dan.
Okay, bye now.
So again, that was Dan McLean. He's the Ward 13 councillor, and he stands out in a council of individuals, I guess you could say. I'm going to be polite here on the show, that I've been very critical of online, and I think for a lot of good reason. And Councillor McLean's added a lot of common sense, and he just says it like it is, which is rare. He doesn't hide, with word salads and avoid the issues like others do. And they're tough issues. They're difficult ones. People get worked up. The entertainment district, Mr. Stanley's pointing out, says, how does this play into 15-minute cities? Who's going to be able to use it? Well, that's a mixed thing. See, that's one of the ones I see as controversial. I have issues. The bottom line is we're into it. But I mean, some people can say, well, you still feel you could pull out of a green line, but you can't pull out of an arena. Well, there's a bit of a different partnership with a private interest going on now. This is where I think I'm offside with most Calgarians. This is where conservatives can sometimes have some double standards going on, I find. And it's not unique to Calgary by any means. We want to stay out of the private sector. We don't want tax dollars going into it. But, my home team needs an arena. Well, suddenly maybe I could afford to have some of my... Well, we have a bit of a double standard there. On a bigger issue, supply management's one I love going on about we're conservative. Oh, well, what about that Soviet-style supply dairy management system? Oh, well, we don't want to talk about that right now. Well, we got to get a little more consistent. In the past, in the last council, we had Jeremy Farkas, who was on there. One of the things that Jeremy did that Dan does, as he pointed out, is he keeps his voting records public. I believe that's what Farkas did with the Manning Institute. And the Manning Institute used to really put it to City Hall when it was ninchy because they would publish those. Because it's weird, provincially, federally, you've got Hansard. You can see where the MPs and MLAs voted and what they did. But City Hall tries to keep that information as tight as possible. And that way, the less principled members sometimes can just hide from their own history and avoid it. And, you should wear what your votes were. You should keep them down the road. And McLean's been doing that. And it's good because that puts pressure on the other ones. Because, hey, if the other ones won't do it, it's a pretty simple question. Well, if he can, why can't you? And then you can research and see what you may or may not want to vote for as things go. So speaking of, I'm glad he approached the bureaucracy too, and the bureaucrats, the people, the inefficiency, the problems. And again, we had that on every level. This was an interesting one that came out on Black Locks with the federal bureaucrats. It seems federal buildings, the office buildings, even before the pandemic, because right now we got all the civil service fighting returning to work for more than 2 days a week as it is, or returning to the office. They work very hard from home, Yeah, try calling one. Those offices were 40% empty before the pandemic. These guys weren't even going there before the pandemic happened. The pandemic just gave them an excuse. We've got room. I mean, this is some numbers according to a briefing note. 50% of the office space was vacant in the National Capital Region. And prior to the pandemic, it was underutilized by 40%. This is our money going. Meanwhile, even though Trudeau hired 40% more civil servants in his period in office, yeah, it's bloated by 40% more, they still had 40% vacancy going on in those offices. They're just giving checks to people to sit around home, play Minecraft, and self-abuse. You can read into that whatever you like. But it gets tiresome. And you look at most of the big bills. When you look at big bills for tax dollars, it's usually salaries. That's a huge, huge part of it. We're paying a whole heck of a lot of people to do not very much at all. And Paradoxy saying Blacklocks is doing amazing work. And he's right. You know, they're fantastic. They're a news service. We get a lot of our stuff from there. They dig through those records. They dig through the committee notes, through the meetings. All that stuff's there, you know. What the government does is I never could get that word, obfuscate. Either way, they bury their info, baffle with BS. They stuff it in there, in reports, in long, boring things. And Blacklocks gets in there and digs into those. They get into the Gazette and the Hansard and things like that and find those gems, and they share them with us. So this was a briefing note that they found. But boy, think about that, 40% empty. Prior to the pandemic and for years, would any, well, there's some pretty bad private businesses out, but most private businesses, would they sit with 40% of their facilities empty for such an extended period of time? Of course they wouldn't. It's ridiculous, but you get to pay for that. You get to pay for those empty offices and those people to sit at home and serve you so well. I mean, try to call the CRA or get a passport renewed and just see how hard they're working indeed. All right. Well, let's talk to somebody who does work hard, and that's our business and energy specialist here, Sean Polzer. He's in studio, and you've had a lot going on. Boy, all kinds of things between the rail line and energy news and 7-Eleven and
yeah, there's been no shortage of business news to go around. It's hard to kind of pick out some of the highlights. Yeah.
So, well, what do we got going on? What's burning a hole through your laptop today?
Oh, well, you know, we've the ongoing saga of Harley Davidson.
Oh, yeah.
And Robbie Starbuck down in the States, the DEI crusader. I think he was a former Republican candidate either during the midterms. I think it was for Congress. Anyway, so he has been putting pressure on Harley Davidson. And it coincided with the Sturgis motorcycle rally down in South Dakota. I don't know if you know what Sturgis is.
Yeah, I do. Actually,
yeah, it's huge. It's like 500,000 bikers descend on a small little town in the Black Hills, and 90% of them are riding Harleys. And apparently they were none too pleased with Harley Davidson this year. And on the final day of the rally, Harley caved in, wrapped up, and put out a statement, said that they are abandoning their DEI policies and inclusion, and will no longer support pride rallies for 12-year-olds and the like.
So, well, it's funny with the whole trend of these companies going into DEI and woke causes and everything. I mean, it's been all companies kind of. I think what we're seeing though is where it's crumbling is the misfires where there were companies that most definitely their customer base weren't the woke types. I mean, Bud drinkers, John Deere, you know, tractor purchasers, and now Harley Davidsons. These aren't downtown latte lapping hipsters that these guys are annoying. These are bikers, farmers, and beer drinkers.
Well, and that's absolutely correct. And, you know, the one thing that they have in common is that they're all Fortune 500 companies. So, you know, Mr. Starbuck, he's only on number 3. He's batting 3 for 3 now, but he's got like a whole long list to go. And we're all just kind of sitting here waiting on our
see what the next one is.
To see what the next one is going to be. I don't know. Like, what do you think? Pepperidge Farms.
I mean, I haven't watched that closely. Even some of the smaller companies, but I don't know if you could directly correlate that with the going woke thing. But you know, Bed Bath and Beyond. I mean, they're up fiscal Crap Creek and a few other large outfits. Though I mean, that could be related to retail having a hard time and things like that. But they were very woke companies, and they're doing very badly.
Well, and they're also kind of targeted to specific demographics. Like so, Bed Bath and Beyond, you could say suburban women, you know, the kind that in the American election right now are, you know, kind of leaning away from some of these woke things for themselves, right? So maybe there's sub demographics going on in there.
It's interesting to watch,
and also whether or not it would happen up here. I can't even think of like what would be a great Canadian company that would be,
I don't know. It's Tim Hortons. I mean, but they've had little things that have happened, but they haven't really gone overboard with the woke that much, or not that we've seen. I mean, they do the little things every company does now, but yeah, that would be an institution to come down if they somehow stepped in it.
And then, of course, we've got the pending rail strike.
Yes,
midnight tonight, Thursday. I live in Bowness, so the trains come screaming through the river valley there. So I might be able to get some sleep tonight, hopefully. But
so somebody sees a bright side. Hey, it's only $1 billion a day in goods, but damn, I'm going to get a good sleep. Okay, well, that's good.
Well, I'll know if they're actually locked up.
That's how to find a silver
But
line.
there's a lot of different angles on that one. Mm-hmm. So got a story just going up right now about propane. So 97% of all the propane produced in Canada comes mostly from the Edmonton area, but Alberta and Saskatchewan. And about 85% of it goes down east, and it gets funneled off into Michigan on the Enbridge pipeline on this Line 5 that they want to shut down because Canada is the largest supplier of propane into Michigan. Quebec, about 85%.
Quebec uses a lot of propane, I believe.
It's its backup power system because it relies so heavily on hydro, right? Mm-hmm. So whereas in Alberta, like hospitals could use diesel fuel, in Quebec, they're all geared up for propane, and they've only basically got about a week's supply. So it's going to be interesting to see who's going to cave first here, right? If it's going to be like the Western provinces and the agricultural producers, or if it's going to be these propane people down east.
Or will the government cave in the sense? I mean, they've been trying to avoid suddenly being stuck in a position of imposing binding arbitration on this. They don't want to get in the middle of it if they can avoid it. But I mean, the pressures are going to come from premiers, from large companies, from producers, from Quebec homeowners.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they've already caved in on fuel oil in the Maritimes. And here's another thing. Like after fuel oil, propane is a primary source of heating, power, cooking fuel in places like Prince Edward Island that don't even actually have direct rail access. They have to ship it by rail to like New Brunswick and then put it over the Confederation Bridge on trucks, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't think the strike's going to, I mean, it's going to be costly, strike, lockout, whatever we want to call it, but I can't imagine it lasting too long because the cost of them not moving those goods is just going to be too high.
It's going to be enormous. Yeah. And then finally, we've got, so we're coming up at the end of the month on Global, and we've kind of been following this saga too. We have kind of an insider over there who's kind of kept us in the loop on some of the, I don't know what you'd call it, the failings of mainstream media giant Darling that used to be worth about $20 billion. It's now only worth about $250 million.
Oh yeah, it's been a collapse.
So long-time news anchors like Linda Olson and I think there was Weatherman up in Edmonton, they've been there since CITV days. They're all leaving here at the end of the month. They're getting their packages. And the company is going to be renegotiating its debt covenants with its lenders. And there's a few wrinkles in there because you've got foreign ownership limits on media. It could be a similar situation like you had with CanWest, where as opposed to having direct investment in the company, you had American hedge funds come up and buy the debt and then basically just milk it for the interest rates and rag it on the way down.
It's not a rosy outlook for them. And I mean, it's an industry that they need to reevaluate and restructure and reconsider how they do everything. But if they're capable of it at this point.
Well, and it's not just in Canada either, because the whole cable TV industry in the United States is undergoing this whole shuffle as well. So down in Los Angeles, the big studios are cutting staff and closing things, and it all has to do with the cable network shows that they're producing that are all now the enemy at the gate is Netflix, and the streaming services like Disney.
And it's hard to compete with. I mean, I got to admit, at home, I barely go on a conventional TV anymore. I got Prime, I got Netflix, I use DAZN for my sports fix. I mean, how those networks compete, they're going to have to figure it out.
I watch TSN for CFL football.
I'm an NFL guy. My season's coming in a few weeks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the update then today, and we'll let you get back in there to ghoulishly watch these companies collapsing for DEI, rail stoppages, and media revaluing while you get a good sleep because of the lack of trains.
Well, let's just say that I'm happy to be here.
My opportunity to make you look so heartless when I'm usually the one accused of. All right.
Thanks a lot, Cory.
All right. Thanks, Sean. Right. And yes, again, watch it. I mean, yeah, that global story was topping our traffic for a while because there's an attachment. Things have changed, but we really did attach to our old media personalities. And Linda Olson, I mean, she was a news reader. She wasn't getting into the mix and the opinion and all of that. She was just a valued voice for a long time. A lot of them were. I mean, I rip into legacy media all the time, but it doesn't mean there weren't actually and aren't still some very good people in there, some people who really put in good service for a long time. And I don't want to celebrate their losing their jobs. I'm celebrating the end of the old legacy media establishment because it's garbage. It's gone to hell. But it's still sad to see some of the people disappearing like that. And I guess I'll close out with one person who passed away. People in Calgary and area would know him. Others outside of there wouldn't, but it's kind of an aspect of old school type of TV. His name was Ron Barge. In Calgary, he was known as Buckshot. And when I was a kid at lunchtime, when you get home from school, you'd rush in and you'd watch the Buckshot show, and it was produced in Calgary. If you were lucky, your parents submitted your name on your birthday, and you'd have your name read on TV by Buckshot. It was one of your biggest thrills of your young life. Unfortunately, he passed away the other day, but it shows those personalities that did build in local TV stations. In those days, every city kind of had their own, children's show host and their news hosts and their personalities, and they were part of the community, and it was a whole big thing. And those days are gone, and it's sad. It's sad that they've passed, but we can't turn the clock back. But either way, I just, want to send that hat tip to Buckshot. I see a few of the commenters remembering it, and it's a sad passing. I mean, he lived a long, full life, but, it's a lot of nostalgia, and we grew up with him and Benny the Bear and the others on there. So either way, we'll close out on that. The new media is still here. We're still going strong, guys, and it's thanks to you, and we appreciate it. News isn't going away. It's just changing. So thanks for tuning in today, guys. Tune in to the pipeline later on tonight. Check out toastingted.ca if you want to get to that event in Edmonton. I'll be up there for that. It's going to be really good about, looking into Ted Byfield and remembering his life and contributions. And again, share those share the links, do all that, hit the like button, all those things that the influencers talk about, but it is important. This is how we stay on top and keeping up there as an independent media source. So thanks again. We will see you next week at this time.